So this is Osmosis in the Bowel Part 4. I went ahead and drew my arrows on to make this a little bit easier. So now we're going to see what happens when we have a pathology. So here's the small intestine, lumen of the small intestine. Food solutes are entering because we've eaten something. When food solutes enter the small intestine, it makes it salty. Water follows salt. So water will move from the bloodstream into the small intestine right here. Then we hit a blockage. When we hit a blockage, that prevents the solutes from being able to move distal to the blockage. So therefore, now we're not getting that absorption of those solutes, right? So if the solutes aren't being absorbed into the bloodstream, water will not follow. So we will not get osmosis distal to that blockage. Water is not returned to the blood. So we've taken water out of the blood and we've not returned it. That's the biggest deal there. So when we remove water from the blood, that's going to decrease blood volume. We are not restoring the blood volume here. So when we look at our questions here, with the food solids in the intestine on this side, is the blood in the side of the vessel hyper or hypotonic to mixture? Well, on this side, the blood was actually hypotonic, right, to the small intestine. Which way will water move on this side of the blockage? Into or out of? Into. Right, water will move into the small intestine. Draw an arrow, and I've already done that. Okay, then it says, since food is not being absorbed into the blood past the blockage, will water move from the intestines into the blood? We said no, right? It would not. So we're not restoring our blood volume, and blood volume will drop. So what happens to the blood volume? It's going to drop. What happens to the blood pressure? If blood volume drops, so does blood pressure. Okay, so let's see if we can get to the next page. For this reason, we've dropped blood volume, blood pressure is dropping. We need to treat with aggressive fluid resuscitation. So what is fluid resuscitation? Well, that's fluid replacement. So we're going to give the patient fluid replacement to try to bring their blood volume back up. And that can be done orally or intravenously. This patient could go into hypovolemic shock. Hypovolemic means low volume. So low blood volume is hypovolemic shock. When you lose more than 20% of your blood volume, it's known that's what can create hypovolemic shock. It's going to drop blood pressure. It's going to do a little list of things here that you're going to see. So let's go ahead and answer these questions. When that happens, when the blood volume drops, are we going to see an increase or decrease in these things? When blood volume drops, we'll see a decrease in blood pressure. When that blood volume and blood pressure drops, we'll see an increase in heart rate. Because here's the thing. Your body tissues are screaming for oxygen and nutrients. Because your blood volume is low and your blood pressure is low, it's very difficult to get those nutrients and oxygen to those distal tissues. So your heart starts to think, oh my gosh, I'm not pumping hard enough. I need to speed up my heart rate so I can hurry up and distribute those nutrients and that oxygen to those tissues. So that's why your heart rate will increase. Your urine production will decrease because the kidneys are not getting good blood flow, right? If your blood volume and blood pressure have dropped, kidneys aren't going to get good blood flow. That's going to drop your urine production. Your pulse strength will be low. Now your electrolyte level will be high. And that's because you've removed water from the blood. So the solutes that are already in there, those ions that are already in there, are going to be relatively high now because the water is low because you removed water from the bloodstream. So that's kind of this last little thing here. It says you get the results and everything is out of balance. And we say, could that be the result of her intestinal obstruction? We say yes. Her blood water volume is low. So the solutes in the blood will be high. So that does explain why her blood concentrations are completely out of whack. Okay, then the next one says the ER physician has ordered intravenous fluid replacement to try to bring her blood volume up. Well, because her blood volume is low due to a loss of water, So replacing that water using IV fluids will restore her blood volume. Alrighty. Okay, and then this last page here asks about, says that she, is not really agreeing to a coloscopy. That's what they want to do, a colostomy rather, because she had an aunt that had an ileostomy, and her aunt really struggled with water balance. And so what's the deal? So it says to distinguish between a colostomy and an ileostomy. And basically a colostomy is when they make an opening in the large intestine and put a sac on that opening, and the waste products will dump into that sac, versus an ileostomy is an opening in the small intestine. So with the colostomy, you still have a good portion of that large intestine left. In the ileostomy, you do not. They've removed most or all of the large intestine, and the food goes straight from the small intestine into the bag that's inserted. So I'm going to go ahead and make one last video in this series so I can show you a picture distinguishing between these two and how that affects the formation of the stools and the reabsorption of water. So one more and then we'll be done.